Well, God bless you, everybody. Pastor Amir Khan back again. And boy, we are super excited about our special guest today, Dr. Stephanie. Oh my gosh, Dr. Stephanie Harris, we are so glad to have you with us today. This is the executive director of New Jersey's Amistad Commission. And I mean, that's powerful, especially when we think of New Jersey. You know, New Jersey has a lot of firsts, but here we have New Jersey, the first law passed for the Armistad Commission, and then actually the first office actually ever established in the entire country. And you are the executive director. Welcome.
Thank
And,
you.
and listen, while we have you with the floor, talk about what's happening and what's going on with the Amistad right before we get to the main topic for tonight.
Well, Pastor Khan, I really appreciate this opportunity to even be here with you. And yes, the New Jersey Amistad Commission and the New Jersey Amistad Law, it's the first one in the nation. It passed in 2002. I know there's a lot of firsts for New Jersey, and there's a lot of things that we sometimes are proud about and sometimes we're not so proud about in New Jersey. But I think this is one in which we were really at the forefront to what now is becoming a very popular conversation, and that is the real push to make sure that Afro-American history, the narratives of all of our peoples, are included within the K through 12 curriculum for our students, and that they really get a real focus of history that lets them understand all of their collective contributions, because we speak a lot about wanting them to become global citizens, global learners, really being able to understand the world in which they live in and how to frame it. Social studies is the place in which we socialize them to be able to work and live within this world. And so what we have done by New Jersey is really make a space where in that content area and all other areas appropriate, that our narratives are one that are diversified, that we are demarginalizing people and making sure that there is an inclusive space for all of our collective contributions and our collective histories and stories and narratives in the arts and literature can be transcribed for students
That's
and
awesome.
imprinted on them. It is. It's really, it's a big lift. But I guess sometimes when I sit back and listen to it, even myself repeat it, I understand the importance of it, especially, most especially in 2021. You know,
Absolutely. You know, that's a great segue for why we have you on the program tonight, because it's amazing. I mean, Thursday is going to be a transformational, amazing day, but all the things that led up to today, what's happening in the country, this civil unrest, the stampede on the Capitol last week, just the division, what's happening. There's a lot of history that goes behind it. You are, you know, the expert when it comes to African American history. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Talk about what's happening. I used a scripture yesterday with Reverend Green, and it
uh-huh.
says that the men of Issachar, they had an understanding of the times and they knew what to do in those times. And we look to individuals like yourself to help us understand what's going on. You get the downloads from the Holy Spirit, and you know
Yeah.
you get the revelation from reading in the books as well. But we want to turn it over to you, and this is kind of a preview, just a teaser for tomorrow. Which, by the way, you'll see the flyer on here at the end. But this is going to be a tremendous, tremendous Zoom presentation on Tuesday. That's
Yeah.
Tuesday, January the 19th. And that's going to be at 7 o'clock. And you're going to have Reverend Green, senior advisor to Governor Murphy, but also an adjunct professor in African American studies and history, along with our dear friend, Dr. Stephanie Harris. So let me turn it over to you and talk about what's going on today.
So, it's interesting that us history nerds that have spent so much time in these books and kind of looking at the reality as it has been this American story and how it even has fit into the global story, are finding ourselves being able to see things very clearly and concisely. And I feel like we're almost like, we've got this trumpet that we're trying to consistently have people to be able to see, to be able to understand, to be able to see the interconnections. And, it's a great time to actually be a historian. As crazy as all this going on, but it really
Yeah.
does feel really good about being able to bring some of this knowledge to the forefront, because I think for so many of us, history is one of those content areas where, we kind of remember this kind of rote memorization of like people, places, and things. And that, as soon as we get the download, it kind of left us. And so, the interconnections and, if it's taught well, it's always taught as like this really like incredible soap opera that really engages learners and thinkers about all of the realities that have happened before us, but also a wonderful space to actually gain some knowledge about what has happened in the past, so that we are not condemned to make the same mistakes. I love quotes. I love quotes. And since today is Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, I have referenced this one a number of times just today. And this is not one that most people even think about or attribute to him. But he says the phrase that we are not makers of history, but we are made by history.
Wow.
And most
You
people
gotta
don't.
repeat that again, please.
We
Wow.
are not makers of history,
Hmm.
but we are made by history. So I attribute that to sort of thinking about the reality of even who we are as people, right? We consider ourselves as learned individuals that are able to make decisions, and our career choices, the way in which we have our policy choices, et cetera, are the individual decisions that we make as adults. But yet, some of that is the download of how we think, our processes, the DNA that is intrinsically a part of us, that comes and predates who we are, that frames our thought processes, or our social political leanings, or our perspectives on when we look at things, or when we can bring things to the table. I think that is what Martin Luther King was trying to say. I think Dr. Martin Luther King was saying that, although we are making history every day, we're also made by it. And so because we are made by it, it is foolish to not be cognizant of the things that have preceded us. And this week has given us a real opportunity to be able to look back and be able to assess where our nation has been, where it can go, and maybe even think about maybe some corrective actions, or at the very least, not put ourselves in this blanket of ignorance that we don't understand what we are looking at. Because I think so many of us, and so many conversations I've had in the last week, is that people are just not cognizant, or they're shocked at what they're looking at, because they might not understand how we got here. They haven't looked at the
Did history repeat itself?
maybe not verbatim, but I think all of the markers are what we're looking at right now have come before. They're not. They are part of the DNA, and unfortunately, there are some systems that, in our development as a nation, in a global, in an ecosystem, as a systemic kind of idea, have been so well oiled that we work within them. And because they're so well oiled, we don't even see them. And because we don't even see them, we're not even recognizing their outcomes. And so the not being able to recognize their outcomes mean that we cannot also be able to figure out and deconstruct how we sometimes need to get ourselves out of it. And history can be a wonderful teacher about that. The reality of why we want our students to be able to learn is because we do want them to make informed decision making. But how can anybody make informed decision making about anything unless they are knowledgeable about what they're seeing? We haven't done that. You hear the quote all the time, those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Something we've heard many times.
Yes.
We use it as an idiom, but have we really thought about what that means? If you don't remember the past, if you haven't been taught it, then will we consistently repeat it? And can we afford to in 2021? I think the reality of what we saw last week, and what we have been watching over the last few years unraveling itself, is something that we can't be condemned to repeat. Some of the things that we have made go away in this nation that we've made great strides to go away. And we would be doing a disservice for those that died and fought in past generations to let it just rear itself again without even the knowledge of how to stem it before it goes so far that it is eliminating the strides that we've made.
Mm.
Isabel Wilkerson, who most people know from the book The Warmth of Other Suns, wrote a phenomenal book that came out this summer called Cast. And I shared her preface of the text in a conversation with you and Reverend Green, which is why I think sort of became the impetus for this conversation.
Yes.
And her alliteration and her ability to make comparisons are brilliant. And the actual intro to the book, which actually really for me really pulled it in, and I think as to why I find that this book right now and why I am consistently reading it and reviewing it. The premise is about the American caste system as opposed to even the racial system, and really understanding what that has meant, right? And it's a comparison analysis. Done very well in a very user-friendly kind of way about the comparisons of German caste systems and the caste systems in India, but also about America's and what they have meant in regards of what is meant in the lived experiences of Americans, and what that has meant in regards of how that has structured our thoughts, our beliefs, and also our reactions to moments in history. But she begins the preface of the book by discussing an event that happened in 2016 in Siberia, which actually seems, I'm kind of like, okay, where she's going with this when she reads it. She begins by talking about the melting of the ice caps in Siberia. And she says that with the melting of the ice caps in Siberia, which of course is in Russia, a number of school children had become extremely ill and had ended up going to the hospital. And the doctors were unsure what they were looking at, unable to treat it. And then they were able to kind of, do some analysis and find out that that during the 1940s in that area of the country or the continent, there had been some experimentations for chemical warfare for World War II, where they were experimenting with anthrax. And in the experimentation with anthrax, it had become a part of the ecosystem and actually had killed off a number of the reindeer that populated that area. Now think about this, right? So I was like, so as I'm reading it, I'm like, okay, where are you going with this, right?
Yeah.
What does this have to do with, caste systems or the reality of, what we're looking at now? Well, she makes the argument that with the ice caps, beginning to freeze and de-ice, that the carcasses and the remains of a lot of those reindeer who had been frozen in the ecosystem in their decomposition had begun to thaw. And although there was just bones left, right? Just bones, decomposed bones, something that was dead and buried from a time that for most of the people and the doctors that were currently in the medical practices and the hospitals at that time, and all of those students that were now impacted and affected, they had never seen. But because of the thawing, the anthrax had reared its head again, and it had completely infected the ecosystem, the water structures, the reality.
So anthrax, it was always there.
It's always there.
Covered.
Buried beneath the surface.
Wow.
Reared again because of timing, because of the reality of the circumstances, the conditions, right? The conditions had unearthed this deadly virus, and it was infecting the children. And no one was even familiar or was even armed to be able to even battle it.
What a great revelation.
They had to recognize and discover what it was. That was the premise of why she entered into this conversation, and how she said that we needed to be able to confront our histories, our narratives, the systems, the eco-structures that have been unearthed because of the current circumstances, right? And what we saw, I think, in the last week is just that. we have unearthed some of the anthrax. We have released it into our ecosystems, and everybody's standing in shock.
So is Donald Trump or is it his people? Is it the culture that has caused the spiritual global warming that has now released this? What is it?
I think spiritually we need to look at it bigger than the person, right? I think the reality is that it's the weaponizing of that entire system. And I think the reality of, it's almost funny that it was the comparative analysis for 2016, which of course is the same year as the election. And I think what we didn't understand about the election is it was unearthing something. It was unearthing some of the dormant ideas that date back to times past that were very dog whistle, right? We heard it, it made us uncomfortable. We knew it was something, but so many of us didn't want to either deal with it or really believe that it could rear itself again. And then what we have found is that it is consistently rearing itself. And in its rearing, it galvanized those ideologies again. And I think they fully exploded and exercised themselves last week. And now we're in a space where we've got to be able to speak it, name it, and then heal it. But you can't name anything unless you're going to be willing to actually confront it. And you can't heal it if you're not willing to discuss it. So I think that's where we are. We got to be able to look at the history, understand how firmly baked it has been in America. That does not mean or detract away from our understanding or even embracing of what this nation's capabilities can be. But just like any parent that loves their child, we understand their child is not an angel, right? It comes with the dichotomy of good and bad that are also firmly baked and that will grow up side by side and inside. And maybe just like the idea of wheat and shaft, right? If you think about it biblically.
Yep.
They come up together. They come up together.
So the story in Siberia, eventually, I guess the doctors discovered that it was
the anthrax, and then they were able to
have a vaccine
tackle it and heal the children.
So
But
what is our vaccine for today?
I think some of it is truth. Some of it is reconciliation. Some of it is finally being able to unearth, name, and look at the systems. And until we get to those spaces where we can, maybe it is, like Isabel Wilkerson says, a caste system that we have all firmly and have been sort of come up in, right? Or birthed within. Maybe we have not really looked at it that way. Maybe we have named race. Maybe it is caste. Maybe it has made us all complicit as players in this narrative. Maybe the realities of the way in which we have seen great strides in those systems have broken these ideas open because they're unearthing a space in which there are contradictory ideas to what people prescribe as this caste system, right? And so maybe the civil rights gains and the reality of, voting rights and et cetera, I think that's, for me, I think that is why Georgia last week became so very important and pivotal. The reality that if we're talking about a caste system, that the decision about an election was relegated, as some would say, or elevated, as I would like to say, to the reality of those that were cast in the lowest rung of what America wanted to make that system, those that they deemed from its inception to be of an enslaved caste, that would not be granted the same rights, that would be outside of the parameters of this American system, yet the ones that would be the builders of it, but not the promises or the guarantees of it, be able to exercise. The fact that our history collectively has been one where we have made such great strides to be able to put ourselves back into that American promise.
Mm.
And then last week, be able to shift in a state that by design, not by happenstance, but by design, created a very long system to be able to prevent our ability to galvanize enough numbers and support to shift a political climate. We did that last week.
Absolutely.
And then within hours, we saw what happened at the Capitol.
So, again, this is a little teaser for Tuesday, January the 19th, 7 p.m. We're going to have Dr. Stephanie Harris along with Dr. Reverend Derek Green, and you'll be able to ask questions. It's going to be phenomenal. The information's on the screen, or at least it will be available at the end of this broadcast. I heard from Dr. Stephanie tonight, the great teacher. Let me tap into that prophet right now.
Thank you.
Dr. Stephanie, the prophet. What is going to happen after? We're going to give a little tease and we have to close it out for today, but prophet Stephanie, what's going to happen after Thursday?
We're going to have to confront and name it so that this nation can heal. Because if we do not, we're going to find that this downward spiral is going to continue. We would be foolish to believe that the transition of power on Wednesday is going to create a bomb. It is not. And if this nation does not evoke itself on its collective promise that it is a nation of rules and laws and do what it needs to do, it is only going to continue to fracture and cause division. And as everyone is talking about this healing that they want, the only way we're going to be able to do that is to truly begin to name it, speak it, and then begin to dismantle these systems that have created these repeated histories time and time again, one space at a time. That's the real work.
Do you feel President Biden and Vice President Kamala, do they have what it takes to take us to that promised land?
I don't think it's ever going to be on the backs of one or two individuals to be able to take us to the promised land. What I do believe is that the collective promise of them being elected and the way they have been elected means that there are enough of us that understand what that election meant, what direction we wanted to see our nation go in. There's enough of us that saw that anthrax and said, absolutely not.
Wow.
That's what I believe.
Boy, what a great way. We can stop right there. Listen, I can't wait for Tuesday at 7 p.m. to get you and Dr. Green to feed off of each other and questions and answers that will come forth. Listen, the Zoom information will be right there. Dr. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, absolutely. I will see you tomorrow. And let's not forget Dr. King's quote, right? We have so many. We have so many, but we need to really, really delve into that one too, especially for the reality of our DNA, right? It's a point of pride. We are made by history, which means we have ancestral memory.
By history, my God. Listen, let's make history. Let's be made by history.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Hey, everybody. Prayerfully, we'll see you Tuesday evening, 7 p.m. And you know what? We'll keep running the broadcast as well. We'll tape it tomorrow night and we'll play that as well if you cannot be on. But it'd be great to come on. You can ask questions to Dr. Stephanie and to Dr. Green. It's going to be a great one. Tuesday evening, January the 19th at 7 p.m. God bless you. Thank you, Dr. Harris. Love you.
Absolutely. Love you too. Thank you.
Be blessed, everybody. See you tomorrow night.